Good afternoon. My name is Ahmed Hussein. I'm the Executive Director of Thorncliffe Neighborhood Office. And we're very delighted to host this event today. Thorncliffe Park and Flemington Park are very happy to host this important event. It is very fitting and in terms of our diversity. And it's really something we say here in Thorncliffe, which we say, today's Thorncliffe is tomorrow's Canada. So I will do a little bit of housekeeping. If people need washrooms are just across the room. On the left is men's washroom, and on the left is women's washroom. So I want to acknowledge the honorable ministers who are here and other distinguished guests who are here today. I would like to start with Steve Takenis, who will be leading us with opening ceremony and prayers. Steve is an Ojibwe of Nipissing First Nations. He's the Executive Director of Native Men's Resident. Steve is very active in Toronto. Steve volunteers a number of Aboriginal and community activities, including employment training programs, legal services, Toronto Police Services, and consultative committee and Toronto Aboriginal Social Service Council. Steve also teaches traditional drumming to the youth and men at various Native organizations inside and outside of Toronto. Please join me in welcoming Steve.
Thank you, Ahmed, for the introduction. So, it's a pleasure to be here today. I know I've been at a number of the community forums for the Anti-Racism Directorate, and I was able to do some of the openings to, try to start the meetings off in a nice way, in a good way. I know the topic of racism is always something that brings out different emotions in people. Sometimes it can bring out feelings of hurt. It can bring out feelings of vulnerability. And, I know the forums have been a safe place to talk about those things. So I was asked today to do an opening prayer and start us off in a good way. So first I'd like to acknowledge this land that we sit on is a traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. There's also, before that, the territories of the Haudenosaunee people as well as the Huron-Wendat people. And they say that this territory is what's known as the Dish and One Spoon Treaty, where it was a treaty between the Anishinaabe people and Haudenosaunee people, where the shared hunting grounds and gathering grounds where people shared the territory would sometimes, take food from that dish, where they would only take what they need, and so that there would be some for future generations. So with us residing in this area, we should always be cognizant of taking what we need so that there'll be something left over for future generations and keeping that dish clean. So I'm going to start with a prayer in my language, and then I'm going to sing a song. So, Bonjour, Mishom Misanonik, Nopin Sanonik, Gishem Do, Josh Goje Shiwang Nabe, Manadona Ne, Nisnakaz, Wabshishi, to them, Nibising no Dunch. Migwich Gishem Do, Kinegego, Gajitoyan. Migwich Mishomis Gizis, Gabe Wase Ya Jewin Nongum. Migwich Mishom Nokumis Dabik Gizis, Gabe Wase Yan Jewin Nibitang. Migwich Skakini Kwe Gamadzuin Gamidziang. Migwich Nijam Gamidziang. Migwich Nabe Gamidziang. Migwich Wasaying Gamidziang. Migwich Nasewin Gamidziang. Migwich Nadamushin what I said in the language was my Ojibwe language. Was I introduced my name and the clan I'm from and where I'm from Nipissing First Nation. And I said thank you to the Creator for everything you have given to us. I said thank you to Grandfather Sun for shining down on us during the daytime. I said thank you to Grandmother Moon for shining down on us at night. I said thank you to Mother Earth for giving us life. I said thank you for the food that we eat, for the clean water that we drink. I said thank you for the clean air that we breathe. And I asked the Creator to hear our prayers. So I'm going to sing a song. I know when I spoke at some of the forums before, I would start with a song on the drum. And, you know, I've been fortunate enough where I've been almost able to travel around the world doing the drumming and dancing. And I noticed one time I was in South Korea, I got the opportunity to meet people of different cultures from different places in the world. And one thing I noticed was that they all had their own styles of drums. And I spoke to different people about their drums, you know, where they came from, the origins of their stories, of where they came from. And what I realized was, you know, no matter where we come from on Mother Earth, you know, the drum is one thing that ties all human beings together. And I truly believe that the drum makes the Creator's favorite music. So I'm going to sing a song so that we can start this in a good way.
Thank you so much, Steve. This event is being live streamed and recorded, and it may be publicly made available after today's session. Joining this event means you understand and consent to this event. You will hear remarks from Minister Coteau, the Minister responsible for Anti-Racism and Ministry of Children and Youth Services. Then you will hear some comments from some of our community partners who are here in attendance today. After these comments, everyone will have an opportunity to connect and review the materials provided for the strategic plan. Copies of the plan are available on the tables in the room, at the back of the room. Light refreshments are located at the back of the room. A reminder that the event will be from 1:30. I think we passed 1:30 when we started already. but that's what I was given. To 3:30, and we appreciate your assistance in helping us stay within the time frame. If you have any questions, please ask one of the Directorate staff who are around the room and are wearing name tags. Now, I would like to introduce Minister Michael Coteau. Please join me in welcoming Minister Coteau.
Thank you very much. Well, bonjour, Annie. Bonjour. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I just want to thank everyone for taking time to be here. I can't think of a better place for us to make this announcement than right here in Thorncliffe Park, Flemington Park, at Thorncliffe Neighbourhood Office, the heart of the most diverse community in all of Canada. So I want to thank Ahmed Hussein and his entire staff for accommodating us today. I don't think you anticipated this many people. We've taken over your office, and I just want to say thank you so much. And the work continues. I saw everyone's working out there, so thank you. I want to just thank many of my colleagues that are here from the legislature, Minister Hunter, the Minister of Education, David Zimmer, the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. We have Marie-France Lalonde, the Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services, Minister Laura Albanese, the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. And I know we have Councillor Matthew Green from Hamilton. Thank you for joining us here today. Also, we have the Cabinet Secretary Orzini and Deputy Minister Matthews and Deputy Minister Davidson, and Sam Erie, who leads the ARD. I also want to recognize, did I miss someone? The Attorney General, my good friend Yasser Naqvi. I was saving the best for last. Yasser Naqvi. Well, thank you for being here. I also wanted to just thank the community organizations that are here. I see so many different leaders from so many organizations that are here. I want to say thank you, because without your help, we would not be at this point here today. I wanted to, and I know the Human Rights Commissioner is here as well. I want to just recognize her. But I just want to make a special recognition to the Ontario Regional Chief, Isidore Day. Thank you, sir, for being here. Let's give him a big round of applause. And I also wanted to acknowledge that we're on traditional territory of many Indigenous groups, and pay respect to the long history and culture of the Indigenous community here in Ontario and across this country. So thank you, sir, for being here. It comes as no surprise that despite the fact that we live in the largest, most diverse province in the country, we have a problem with racism. With anti-Indigenous racism, Islamophobia, anti-Black racism, anti-Semitism, with racism and discrimination against racialized people from diverse backgrounds right across this province. Racialized people across Ontario experience systemic racism that manifests itself in many different ways, from disparities at home, in schools, at work, to gaps in healthcare and in our economy. And we know that these disparities in poverty and income inequality are unacceptable. And this government is committed to directly addressing these challenges. Last month alone, we've seen a Toronto mosque set on fire to intimidate worshippers, a swastika drawn in a York classroom, a home of a 16-year-old girl vandalized, broken into and vandalized and sprayed with racial slurs. And even today we saw two Jewish community centers with bomb threats, one in London and one in Toronto here. So we know that racism is hurting our people, it's hurting our children, it's hurting our youth, our communities, our neighbours, and our province. And our government is ready to take responsibility and to make change. A year ago, the Anti-Racism Directorate was established, and as Minister, I was appointed with a mandate to evaluate the state of racism here in the province of Ontario, and then to go out and do something about it. So we traveled right across the province of Ontario. We listened to thousands of people share their stories, heartbreaking experience of how racism has impacted their life. I could never forget the feeling of walking into the first meeting in Toronto with the Premier, and the Mayor was in attendance, and there was more than 1,000 people who were there. Conversation was tense, it was frustrating, it was difficult. Many even referred to the meeting as messy. But that's exactly what we needed to be doing, to have a conversation about the state of racism here in the province of Ontario, a conversation that we know is very difficult to have. Now, remember one man, when the tensions were quite high, explaining to the Premier that he got to a point, he was so frustrated that he got to a point where his anger just left him and that he was just disappointed. I think about how many people in this province feel the same way. They're disappointed that we haven't come further at this point. We're disappointed that we're still having these discussions in this year. Now, we're going to take those stories and we're going to take the lessons we've learned from people and we're going to apply them into action. So I'm proud to be here today with many friends and many colleagues, and I look around the room and I think I know almost everyone in this room. It's incredible. We're here today to announce that we are going to go forward with a 3-year anti-racism strategic plan here in Ontario titled A Better Way Forward. While this specific strategy has been a year in the making, it's taken us about a year, it has taken decades to get to this point. And I believe that it's never too late for us to correct our course. This plan will see the government take concrete steps to end systemic racism in our institutions through 4 priorities. First, we're going to strengthen policy, research, and evaluation. And we're going to do this by collecting better race-based, disaggregated data that can be broke down and better accessed the intersections of identity and the far-reaching impacts of racism. We'll also develop a method for applying an anti-racism perspective to decision-making at early stage to prevent systemic racism from taking root in the first place. Secondly, we will ensure sustainability and accountability. So we'll do this by introducing Ontario's first anti-racism legislation in the spring. And if passed, this legislation will ensure future sustainability and accountability for government's anti-racism work by providing a framework for government and community organizations to identify and dismantle systemic racism. We'll also be committed to being as transparent as possible. We'll share the progress of this work and how it helps to improve people's lives. Our annual progress report will reflect the ongoing collaboration with Indigenous and racialized communities, ministry partners, and government institutions on the initiatives and target this plan. And third, we'll commit to targeted public education and awareness. We'll try to understand people's knowledge and experiences, and we will develop a targeted public education awareness initiative. And we know that this is especially needed when we talk about Islamophobia. There's an urgent need to target this particular type of racism, given the events that have taken place in this country more recently, like the tragic mosque shooting in Quebec and the rise of Islamophobia since September 11th, 2001 around the world. And finally, we'll commit to continue to work closely with our partners and community. A strategy like this cannot be done without the wisdoms of those who have come before us. To eradicate racism, we cannot do this alone. This is a pan-government approach that will have leaders taking a step back to evaluate how our words and our actions impact racialized communities before they begin to form policy. Together, we can work to end systemic racism. Now, I'd be remiss if I were to release an anti-racism strategy without discussing one of the most pressing issues right here at home. We've reached a critical point with anti-black racism here in the province that we need to address. From birth to adolescence, and from adolescence to adulthood, black people in Ontario face uphill battles and the glaring symptoms of systemic and institutional racism. To give you an idea of the crisis, 8.6% of youth in our city are black. Despite this, they make up 41% of children and youth in care. Black youth are overrepresented in homeless youth populations, 4 times more likely than white youth to be stopped by police for a suspicious activity. In 2006 alone, there were 73 homicides in Toronto, and we know too many of those homicides came from the young black community. Black youth are leaving school at higher rates than their peers, and they have lower post-secondary admission rates. And we know that when we talk about unemployment in the black community, it's twice that of the provincial average. We know that systemic racism can't be ended tomorrow. A better way forward is a long-term strategy. But black youth in care today can't wait for that. Now, we can't afford to have young people leave school and not graduate. Black mothers and fathers looking for support to raise their children can't wait. For far too long, funding in this province when it comes to our black youth has been reactive, and it's time that it be responsive. Yeah. So I want black youth in this province to know that their lives matter. I want them to know that they matter, and I want them to know that the government of Ontario and the people of Ontario care for them. That's why I'm introducing the Ontario Black Youth Action Plan based on a collective impact model. The plan will focus on the following areas: mentorship for black youth, support for black parents, increased enrollment and graduations in post-secondary education, providing job training and apprenticeship opportunities, developing skills our youth need today for jobs of tomorrow. And we're going to look ways to counter the violence that's taking place in this city and throughout other cities across the province. So I'm going to set up a steering committee to bring community to the table to create sustainable solutions. So this investment will be a $47 million investment over 4 years. And this plan represents the largest single investment in the, well-being of young black children here in the province, and I think it's a milestone that we can be proud of. It's real funding to help fix a real problem. The Ontario Black Youth Action Plan will help eliminate the dramatic disparities between black youth and non-black youth here at home in classrooms, the journey to post-secondary, in youth justice, and in the workforce. This plan will address outcome disparities from a community and neighborhood level by investing in evidence-based programs delivered by culturally focused organizations that are best suited to connect to young black youth. When we invest in our black youth, we're investing in the future of this province. The Anti-Racism Directorate's 3-year anti-racism strategic plan and the Ontario Black Youth Action Plan aims to eliminate violence, oppression, discrimination, and racism in our own backyard. When even one of our citizens is left behind, the entire province suffers. These are concrete actions from a government to dismantle systemic racism and its devastating impact it's having on our communities. While it isn't a be and end all solution, it is a bold step in the right direction, and this is just the beginning. And thanks to the hard work, the courage and dedication of many people before us here today, we're able to introduce a strategy like this. A Better Way Forward provides the tools for us to make a difference in building a more just, inclusive, and equitable future for all of us. So today I'm proud to be from Ontario. I'm proud to be a member of this government, and I'm proud to stand up for racialized communities and our province's youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. I would like to introduce community partners who will be providing some comments. First, I will introduce Evie Go. Evie? Evie is the Executive Director of Metro Toronto Chinese and South Asian Legal Clinic. Evie has it will take an hour to read her bio, but I will give you in. She's currently a spokesperson for Color of Poverty, a Color of Change. Evie is received her BA from in Economics and Management Studies from University of Waterloo, and she is currently sitting number of organizations, including in Chinese Canadian National Council, Color of Poverty, where she co-chairing. I would like to welcome Evie.
Thank you very much, Chief Day, Minister Coteau, the various ministers who are here, Chief Commissioner, honored guests and friends and allies from the community. Thank you for being here today. Your presence signifies how important today is for all of Ontarians. And I also want to thank TNO and the ESL class students who gave up their class today so that we can have our launch here. I want to start by thanking Minister Coteau and his staff, the whole team, who have been working tirelessly since last year, February 2016, to implement the commitment made by Premier Kathleen Wynne to establish the Anti-Racism Directorate, and whose mandate is to eliminate systemic discrimination and racism in Ontario and to increase public awareness and understanding of racism across the province. The establishment of this directorate is an acknowledgement by the Ontario government that racism is real, and it is an issue that urgently needs to be addressed. And since the announcement last February, we have been reminded time and again, as the minister has mentioned, how racism has affected so many different communities, both Indigenous peoples and people of color, and across so many different aspects of our lives. Racial profiling of African Canadians and Indigenous peoples in both the criminal justice as well as child welfare systems, the violent attacks on Muslims and Arabs in our city and in other parts of Canada, together with the long-fought struggles of too many First Nations who to this day are still fighting for basic rights such as clean water, decent, stable housing, and basic human dignity as the first inhabitants of these territories, just to name a few examples. These are all issues that have not gone away and in some cases have in fact gotten worse over time. And as a member of the Color of Poverty, Color of Change Network, a broad-based racial justice education and advocacy network in Ontario, I'm very pleased to see that a number of the key recommendations that the network has been pushing for are now incorporated into the 3-year anti-racism strategy. In particular, we are very pleased to hear that the government will be introducing legislation to give the minister the power to mandate the collection of disaggregated data on the basis of race and other social demographic identities in order to better measure and understand the impact of government's policies, programs, and practices on racialized and other equity-seeking groups. The collection of disaggregated data is foundational to the success of any anti-racism strategy. Without such data, we simply cannot properly measure the progress over time of any plan that a government might choose to adopt or implement. The data will also help governments set more appropriately targeted goals and objectives, as well as identify gaps in areas that need attention and improvement. And we also fully support some of the population-specific measures that the government will be undertaking to address anti-Black racism and racism facing Indigenous peoples. And I'm looking forward to more announcement in the future on how the government will be addressing Islamophobia, I'm sure. Apart from the data collection and the introduction of a legislative framework, the Color of Poverty, Color of Change has also been urging the minister and the government to introduce strategies to address the color-coded systemic discrimination in workplaces across the province's labor market. A recent study by Ryerson University finds that employers are far less likely to hire people with East Asian and South Asian last names as compared to Caucasian and European-sounding names. This is just one of many studies that highlight the economic disparities in the labor market in which members of racialized communities are denied fair and equal opportunity, employment opportunities simply because of their race or ethnicity. We acknowledge with hope that some positive initiatives have been undertaken by the Premier to achieve more equitable hiring and employment outcomes for those who have for too long gone without. One example is the incorporation of targeted hiring objectives for historically disadvantaged communities into the Community Benefits Agreement negotiated for the Eglinton Crosstown Transit Project. So we look forward to seeing similar hiring expectations and obligations attached to all such public infrastructure projects and investments, because more needs to be done to ensure all Ontarians have equitable access to employment regardless of their race, gender identity, sexuality, and disability. And finally, we look forward to working with Minister Coteau and his team to most effectively implement the anti-racism strategy and to help ensure it is grounded upon and responsive to the needs of racialized communities in Ontario. And towards this end, we also call on the leaders of all political parties in Ontario to support this important strategy in the legislature and beyond for the shared prosperity for all Ontarians. Thank you.
Thank you, Evie. Now I would like to ask Chief Day to say a few words. Chief Day.
Bonjour. Gwisquemegasi in the Indigenous cause. Kanabajing Donji. Kanoje Dotem. My name is Isidore Day. I'm the Ontario Regional Chief, and I'm very honored to be here on the traditional lands of the Mississauga people. I also want to acknowledge Steve. He doesn't look that old, but he is our elder here today, our resident elder. I do want to thank him for his opening invocation, and I always am reminded that we must honor the Creator, creation, the prayers, and the protocols that start these very important events and gatherings. And I can say that from what I know and see of Steve in our community, he's a leader, and he's somebody that we revere as much as our elders because he's very faithful to the ceremonies and protocols. So I want to thank him for that. I do want to also note that in his words, he talked about the drums and the drums of many nations, and I do want to acknowledge that there are many nations represented here today. And what I saw as I listened to the various speakers thus far is the four races of people, the black, the yellow, the white, and the red. We're all here. We're all here together as nations. And we must uplift Minister Coteau for acknowledging and recognizing that there's some work to be done. But today we're unified, and we owe a great debt to the Minister for that. So I do want to acknowledge Premier Kathleen Wynne and her efforts, her commitments, the work that has been done thus far. I have met and worked with many of the ministers that are among us today, and I'm glad to say that as First Nations in Ontario, we are very happy and pleased with the progress that we've been making on a government-to-government basis. I do want to acknowledge and congratulate the Minister and the Anti-Racism Secretariat, or is it a Directorate, for a better way forward. As I listen to the Minister and looking at the policy, legislation, education, and partnership mix that is built within the strategy, I can tell you that I'm very confident that what is the path forward, and what is that path forward will include First Nation people. Just 2 points that I'd like to note here. From the First Nation perspective, we have been afforded, and we certainly work closely with the Ontario government on these types of initiatives. Where we are very clear and make the distinction is that much of what we're dealing with Ontario, with Canada, with municipalities and other jurisdictions, we deal with issues on a government-to-government basis. And in this case, we look at racism and 2 points of history. One being that, I'm not sure if folks know this, but there's a history of racism that is very deep here in this country. The first point is that in April 12, 1876, the Indian Act was given royal assent. And the Indian Act is a piece of legislation that is still alive and well. It is still utilized by the federal government and supported just by convention by the provinces and territories. So institutional racism born out of the Indian Act is one issue that we are working very closely with other governments to ensure it gets eradicated and that we begin to move closer and closer towards a government-to-government relationship, one that respects our nations. And as the young elder and as the minister spoke, I can't help but think about the treaties and the original history that the settler colonial governments had with our people when you landed here on these shores. I also want to point out that the Indian Act has also been awarded some recognition in the apartheid, in the development of the apartheid system in South Africa. In the early 1900s, the Indian Act was offered up by the British monarchy to the South Africans for a model of race-based segregation. Yes, these are hard discussions. Yes, these are things that most Canadians don't know about. But these are things that governments are willing to work with First Nations on in moving forward. I'm very pleased. I'm very appreciative of this Ontario government, Premier Kathleen Wynne and her ministers. But when we come to these events, I'm very keen to recognize the work that lay ahead. And as such, I want to just assure you that I had spoken with Minister Coteau, and he's assured me that within the next 2 weeks, we will be meeting together. We will be discussing what the parallel processes are going forward. Because yes, we need to be part of this type of a strategy, but on a government-to-government basis, we still have the colonial aspect of that relationship to deal with directly. And I certainly have the commitment of this minister and his colleagues and Premier Kathleen Wynne. So congratulations on this announcement. We look forward to some work that lay ahead.
Thank you, Chief Day. Now I would like to welcome next speaker, Ihsan Gardi, Executive Director of National Council of Canadian Muslims. He will provide some brief remarks. Ihsan.
Good afternoon. Bonjour, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. Thank you very much to Premier Wynne, Minister Coteau, Honourable Ministers, Chief Commissioner, and other guests, honoured guests, for gathering here today. Before I begin, I too would like to recognize the borrowed lands that we stand on and to recognize the long history and contributions of the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all Indigenous people to Canada, and to show respect to the Mississaugas of New Credit First Nation. I'm pleased to join you today on behalf of the National Council of Canadian Muslims for this exciting announcement and the release of the new 3-year anti-racism strategic plan, A Better Way Forward. In the last few months, both in Ontario and across Canada, we have witnessed an increasing number of incidents that can be classified as xenophobic and racist, targeting various communities. They have ranged from verbal abuse to vandalism to arson to assaults against women in broad daylight, including one in this very neighborhood. This is a dangerous and startling change that we need to be aware of and vigilant about, and announcements like today will hopefully put a spotlight on these troubling incidents. My Ontario, our Canada, is one of inclusivity not just acceptance. It is one of respect, not just tolerance. We unfortunately saw the worst case scenario a few weeks ago through the tragic events of the Quebec City terrorist attack. This is the first time in recent history a terrorist act took the lives of 6 innocent people in a house of worship in Canada. Azzeddine Soufiane, Khalid Belkacemi, Abu Bakr Thabti, Abdul Karim Hassani, Mamadou Tanou Bari, Ibrahima Bari. We must never forget these names because this loss of innocent lives represents and will serve as a constant reminder that words matter. Hate-filled words have no place in our society. Hate-filled acts are not a passing incident to be ignored. Justice must be served for the 6 and for the thousands like them across this province. And today's announcement of the strategic plan and the path for finding the solutions that will ensure these types of hate crimes never happens again begins now. At the end of January of this year, the results of a recent analysis of Canada's online behaviour commissioned by CBC's Marketplace suggest a 600% jump in the past year in how often Canadians use language online that is racist, Islamophobic, sexist, or otherwise intolerant. The Ontario Human Rights Commission has recognized that anti-Muslim discrimination is, quote, a leading form of contemporary creed-based discrimination in Ontario. Stereotypes of Muslims as a threat to Canadian society and to Canadian security and Canadian values have been particularly pronounced, end quote. Echoing this, according to Statistics Canada, in the last 3 years, hate crimes targeting Muslims have doubled. Muslims report experiencing discrimination or unfair treatment in the past 5 years, and 62% of Canadian Muslims are worried about discrimination. These figures mirror the data that the NCCM has been collecting on hate crimes and incidents targeting Canadian Muslims. To be clear, no one is saying that we shouldn't have a robust, even passionate debate about how we best manage our growing diversity, or that we should not be vigilant about and vociferously defend our cherished rights. At the same time, however, unchecked political rhetoric can drive and foster environments of fear and hate. Just over 17 months ago, we had a federal election here in Canada where Muslims were targeted by similar rhetoric we have seen elsewhere. Today, we still have some elected officials implying that Muslims and other minorities need to be screened for anti-Canadian values. Moving forward, the NCCM is proud to lend its expertise, knowledge, and experience to support the development of new and enhancement of old initiatives. I believe this is a measured plan to build on foundational work that must be supplemented with a strong evidence-based approach. We look forward to developing needs and impact assessments to better understand the challenges faced by equity-seeking communities. And this plan, however, on its own, will not correct decades of inaction, nor will it cure all of the ills in our society. However, it is a bold step in providing a platform for communities, civil society, and government to engage and drive forward real change through policy and legislation where it matters and is needed most. We at the NCCM welcome today's announcement and congratulate Minister Coteau and his team on their tireless work in developing this strategy. Anti-racism is everyone's business, and when one community is targeted, we are all targeted. We have much to do, and we will. Whatever comes next, we face it together.
Thank you, Ihsan. I want to welcome this time Matthew Green, who was elected in 2014 to serve as a councillor for Ward 3 Hamilton Centre. Matthew Green.
Thank you. To the Honourable Minister Michael Coteau, his hard-working Directorate staff, to the Honourable members present, members of Legislature, Chief Day, distinguished guests, community members, and members of the media, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's warm. We could do that. That's good.
Better than that.
I would like to begin by acknowledging my honor and privilege of standing here before you. And I would also like to begin by acknowledging the decades-long work contributed by our frontline organizers, activists, elders, cultural groups, and civic leaders who have fought tirelessly to ensure that our collective experience as racialized people have not been erased, and who consistently suffer the discomfort of having to lead this values conversation in our society despite facing further marginalization and public critique, and who consistently hold us accountable as elected officials for the ongoing history of systemic injustice, demanding that it be addressed at all levels of government with policies that are commensurate to the collective impacts of racism and discrimination. Sisters and brothers, we are definitely, indeed, in historic times. It is an era that I call the new civil rights, not because the issues are new for any of us, but because the demand for a new level of responsibility, a new level of accountability, and a new level of solutions must be met with an immediate action and an ongoing commitment to the same. And I believe that the new civil rights has been led by the direct action of our young Black and Indigenous women and queer folk, which has resulted in this escalated response by our different levels of government to properly and rightfully address the systemic barriers faced by racialized Ontarians. And as an inner city councillor all the way from Hamilton, I am proud to report locally that as a follow-up to the ARD consultation, that with our youth we continue to provide an incredible leadership, organizing community-led initiatives that support the ongoing work of the Anti-Racism Directorate with a clear and critical intersectional analysis and participation. It was historic for us to have the minister provide his time and attention specifically to hearing the youth voices on the issues of racism that they face every day in our city, with the intention to continue to include and center them in the conversation. We are in historic times in this province, when our Premier provided the mandate to the Honourable Minister Coteau, a man who himself understands these issues through the eyes of his own lived experience, and through the Anti-Racism Directorate is providing much needed leadership. And from what we are hearing this afternoon, he is also planning for an equally important, sustainable, strategic investment in funding targeted community partnerships. Recognizing what was clearly articulated throughout the province-wide review, which was that at the community level, in our day-to-day experiences, the policy solutions to identify and address the anti-Indigenous, the anti-Black, and the Islamophobic systemic level barriers, they're already present in our communities. And many of you here today have been working tirelessly on these very issues. And at the grassroots level within our own means and throughout our own support, we've been addressing these issues for decades now. But it's also acknowledged here today, as we've heard, that it is the responsibility of government to directly address these systemic barriers across the province through targeted, universal policy interventions. And as I've heard today, it begins with this 3-year strategic plan, which will capture the disaggregated data across the province, which is necessary to pinpoint the inequities of our public service in order to provide us with appropriate measure to create meaningful change by setting clear targets, service standards, and employment levels across all provincial ministries, boards, and agencies. This is what we've heard today, and this is why I'm excited to be before you, because there is no doubt that racism in our society is a difficult and uncomfortable conversation for us to have. But it is also true that history will remember. History will remember where all of us stood on these issues of racism, injustice, and human rights. And during this time, I'm also very proud to stand alongside all of you. Thank you very much, sisters and brothers.
Okay, we're coming to the end. I would like to thank you for your attendance this afternoon, with special thanks to the Minister Coteau and rolling this 3 years anti-racism strategic plan, and to our speakers. A reminder that after we have finished with the presentation, that you can connect with each other and pick up a copies. Please make sure that you pick up a copy of the strategic plan. Now, I will turn to the Minister.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much again. Thank you to Thorncliffe Neighborhood Office for giving us the opportunity here. And I just want to take, I know that we're going to get some questions. Before I take the questions, I just want to thank the Anti-Racism Directorate staff. They're all around here. Put up your hand if you're a part of the staff. There's a whole bunch of them around here. Some back here. These men and women, for the last year, have been working so hard to get us to this point. And I just want to say thank you, because they're an incredible group of individuals, and thank you. So I think we've got some questions. Yeah, we'll start here.
So if you could say your name, what outlet, and
Jennifer Yang from Star. I'm wondering if you could just explain more about the race-based data collection. Will all ministries and government agencies have to start collecting? Will police have to start collecting race-based data?
So we list four ministries in the actual document. So education, children and youth services. So we'll look at collecting data in child protection. We've had so education, children, youth services. There is justice and corrections, community safety and corrections. So the four. Well, actually, the ministers are all here, right? So. But I know that individually they've, the Minister of Education and other ministers have said that this is an area that they'd like to go into, and we're going to work with them to set up that framework to be able to collect that disaggregated data.
And sorry, just address police specifically, because I know there's calls from
Yes, yes,
so that will be
correct. There's a question behind you. How are you?
I'm Dave, and I'm not media. I'm just community.
Yeah.
When I talk to different people, and the elders in particular, there are fears that this will have the fate, just like the Anti-Racism Secretariat a long time ago, that it will fade away. And my concern is that, particularly for young people, things like this give us hope, and then in 15 years, maybe 15 months, or when you guys may lose, that this will go right out the door with it.
Right.
So what plans are being made to make sure it's permanent, like let's say the Ontario Human Rights Commission, so that way we can have real and tangible progress? Because if you're out in 15 months and this is a 3-year plan, what happens with the remainder of the years in the plan?
Well,
so we're very concerned.
Well, and thank you for the question. Well, our first plan is we're going to win the next election. That's the first thing, and so that will be a guarantee. But I think the legislation is an important piece, right? So what we heard from out in the community is that the last time the Secretariat wasn't back through legislation, and we need to build strong legislation. In fact, Color of Poverty and many other groups made the recommendation that legislation was important, and that's why it's one of the pillars within this this approach. But I think as Ontarians, as community members, as people who are concerned about this particular issue, we just need to continue to work together to set this up so it's successful and to leverage its ability to work with other ministries and community-based organizations so it's integrated right into the everyday. Now, one of the examples of that is I know that Minister Nakvi, when he was in the former role, with the review of carding, the Anti-Racism Directorate was put into the regulation as part of that review process. So, those are the types of things I think that will allow us to best position this entity for success.
If I can interrupt really quickly, this is for media, so if you do want to speak to the minister,
we can get a couple of community members too. Okay, so let's go community member media. Is that fine? So media, we've got community media over here.
So I'm sure anyone in this room would have a lot to say about this, but Minister, I'm wondering if you can get specific at all to where the system help racialize youth before?
Right. There's so many areas, right? You know, when I was a school board trustee back in, you know, I was elected in 2003, and we had this whole debate around, you know, just the collection of data, and you know, we didn't even know what percentage of young black males or females were graduating, what was the level at. So, you know, when we look at the education system, and that's, I'll start from there because, you know, that's the system I know best. You know, we knew that there was a, you know, almost half of young black males in the system not graduating school. You know, we look at child welfare, and we know that, you know, my numbers are under 10% of the population of Toronto, black, African Canadian, yet 40+% of the children in care are part of that system. I think there's many, you know, you look at job numbers, when you look at graduation levels, post-secondary, you know, there's so many disparities that exist, and you look in corrections and the overrepresentation of Indigenous and black youth. There's so many areas that we know that we can do better as a society. And it's interesting because I know that, you know, Carl James has been doing work, and Carl just called you out in the crowd. Carl's not looking up. But you know, the work that, you know, the numbers that we've seen, and, you know, who's doing well in school, who's not doing well in school, and those numbers and what happens generation to generation, you know, there's some challenges there. So we know that there are disparities out there, and, you know, we've got a group of individuals here, ministers, people part of a team, and community who recognize this, and we want to work together and find those solutions together. Yeah. So community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Abdi Agishu, Somali Workers Network, Toronto York Labour Council. So 47 million.
Yeah, I have 47 million.
47 million is a good money.
Yeah.
But this money will reach the children that fall into jail. Our children are already into prison.
Right.
What kind of program and rehabilitation you have for them? And what kind of prevention you have for the next generation? I am from a community that lost 2 generations. So is there I know you will have a steering committee. So how that will help the children that are in the jails and the next generation that are dying on the streets? Thank you.
Well, and that's a very good question. So, you know, I guess if you didn't hear the question, it's what are we going to do to address the issue of the overrepresentation of black youth in prisons? And will any of these resources go to help those children? So I guess when it comes to youth justice and you know, any incarcerated youth, that falls under my ministry, and we've developed a plan specifically working with youth. But I'm working with Marie-France Lalonde to look at ways to work within the adult system as well. So to answer your question, yes, those resources will be used in a multifaceted way. In addition to that, I think the number one piece is, and this is where I think the collective impact model will play a major role, is looking at how to set up, you know, prevention and change so we can influence, you know, the next few generations. Because this is a, you know, an issue that we can, you know, we can identify who's at risk at a very young age. You know, who's on that pathway towards possible, you know, not graduating, you know, maybe ending up in trouble. And those are the things that we need to address as well. So it'll be a combination of both. Media? Yes, sir.
City TV. Can you comment on today's 2 bomb threats that happened against the Jewish community, and also comment on the rise on threats and violence towards the Jewish community?
Right. Thank you very much. So if you didn't hear the question, the comments around some of the these incidents that have taken place, even today, you know, we saw 2. And I don't know the details of what exactly went on, and I'll be briefed after, but I know that there were 2 community centers where there were bomb threats. You know, this is unacceptable. You know, any type of, you know, I went out to Ottawa and met with the Jewish community. I've met with the Jewish community here, and many different people from across the province. This is, you know, this is something that we won't tolerate as Ontarians. Anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, anti-black racism, Indigenous racism is unacceptable, and we're going to continue to work with the community together to look for ways to find solutions. it's kind of sad when you go into a community center where children are playing and there's a, you have to get checked, your ID has to be shown, and this is where children are playing, right? This is not as, these are places where families go, just like, places to worship, and these are the places we need to make sure that, where people go and feel protected. So we'll be working with them. Over here. My French is not very good. Bonjour.
The barrier facing Francophone in Ontario factor into this new strategic plan?
Yeah. So, I've worked with, and this is a question that Marie-France Lalonde has asked many, many times, being the minister responsible for Francophonie in Ontario, Francophone Affairs. And, we went out, we've spoken to people from different communities, and during our consultation, we had people from the Francophone diaspora, African, Caribbean, Canadian, third generation. So I think that it's important for us to make sure that at the end of the day that all those voices are captured, and we're just going to continue to work with the community. And if you have people that you think we should sit down with, I'd be more than happy to sit down and have that conversation as well. Yeah. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that we're in Don Valley West, which is Premier Wynn's, Kathleen Wynn's riding. So I just wanted to let people know, MPP Wynn. And just say thanks again to, I know there's many people from the riding here, so thank you for being here. I'll take a couple more questions. Yep.
Thank you, Minister Coteau. I'd like to first of all start by thanking you and commending you for the work you do in her community. I represent...
thank you.
Thank you. I represent individuals living with sickle cell disorder. And Minister Coteau has taken special interest in ensuring that this set of people have a better life. I'd like to thank you for that. I would also like to address the fact that there is systemic racism in health in her province. Right. Is there any way that the strategic plan will address any of these issues? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Well, it's interesting because as we were moving this through committee and talking in early days, Minister Hoskins came up to me. And he's actually one of the first people who came out to me and says, Michael, what can I do to be part of this? Because Minister Hoskins was the Minister of Children and Youth Services, is aware of the issues. I know last week with the rare blood announcement, there was a sickle cell component, which will help young people as they transfer into the adult system. And we're going to work with organizations like yours, the Ontario-based organization, to look for ways to provide support to better position organizations like yours to work on preventative and knowledge-based, sharing information so communities are aware. Sickle cell affects my family and many African, Caribbean, and people, who are not black, many other people. Sickle cell affects many people, and it is something that we know that if we do it properly, it'll end up helping people more, but saving money in the system. And you're absolutely right. If you look at systemic racism and you look at healthcare, sickle cell is one of those pieces that has not got the due attention that it needs, and we're going to start to focus more on that. So thank you. Is there any questions from the press? Okay, I'll take two more community questions. Donna?
So it's not a question.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes. For leading this very, very important issue. This issue that many of us have strategized and have worked hard and long into the mornings to have people listen and acknowledge the fact that many of our young people are dying in the streets, and they're dying based on the background of systemic racism.
Right.
For those of you who know Sister Ekua Walcott, she is dancing today.
Thank you. Thanks, Lana. Catherine.
Minister, thanks very much for the launch of this strategy. One question. What measures will be taken to engage employers in this strategy? Because a
Right.
big need for our youth is jobs.
Right.
And as much data as we may collect and as much work we will do at the ground level, we need our youth gainfully employed across different sectors.
Right. Thank you for the question. I know Avi spoke a little bit about that issue in particular. I know that there's been, the community benefits program. I know the John Cartwright, the Labour Council, they've been looking at ways to really move on that type of conversation. I think when it comes to procurement process, there needs to be ways to include community. As you build transit through communities, there needs to be an alignment between education, procurement, and community. I grew up in Flemington Park, right next door, and the development that's taking place, in that area and alongside that area. There's so much opportunity to tap into young people in that community to provide that type of work. So I'm going to work with, look at ways in procurement, but also to bring together a group of people through our advisory committee to talk about how we move forward and looking for ways to recognize those employers, because there are some employers out there that are doing an incredible job, and there's some industries that are not doing a very good job. And I don't know, what the root causes specifically are, but I know that there are barriers that need to be removed. So, you have a commitment from me that will work on looking for those opportunities and work with the community to do that. So I'll be reaching out to you. I'll take one last question.
As part of this three-year strategy, is there any plan to tackle the issue of precarious work? We know that it's racialized people. We know it's black and brown people and women who are highly unproportionately represented in precarious work. Is there any part of the strategy that looks at dealing and tackling with precarious work, possibly working with the Changing Workplace Review and Minister Flynn on some sort of strategy?
So at this point, and this is the way I think it's a very good question, and I want people to walk away from here, thinking about this, that what we've done here is we've developed the tools necessary to get to where we need to be. So by collecting the data, by backing it up in legislation, by building awareness, by setting up these tables to have these discussions, we're at a point now where, we've built the tools necessary to dig deep and to figure out where to go next. There's been organizations that have collected data, but not necessarily used that data to create the right type of policy. So I'm interested now to figure out exactly, how to collect that data, but at the same time, the next question I'll be asking, when I leave this meeting to staff is, how are we going to use this data properly, and how are we going to use it in a way to develop the best possible policy possible? And if that data drives us in a direction, and I don't know exactly, and I know that, the question you ask, obviously, any type of employment and economic disparities are a serious issue, but I can't answer the specifics, at this point around that issue, because I don't know what the right, step forward is in regards to tackling that issue. I just need to figure some things out in regards to collecting that data, setting it up properly, and putting in that legislation and working with the community on next steps. So, I hope we can, continue this conversation to see how we can open up even conversations around that. I'm going to continue to consult, go out there and talk to the community. The consultation process is not over, and I look forward to working with people to tackle some of those issues. So, thank you very much for being here today. I wish everyone a great day and all the best.